Hi everyone, welcome to Vision IS and welcome to class number 4 of internal security in the regular batch. And in the last class we were discussing about organized crime and terrorism, and we'll continue our discussion with that particular topic today. And then we'll move on to the topic of the basics of cybersecurity, as well as the role of media and social media in creating challenges to India's internal security. Those are the topics that we are supposed to cover today. In case we are short on time, which I don't think would be the case, we would probably have some spillover to the next class, but I believe that we should be able to cover all the topics that we are planning to cover in today's class. So let's begin. Let's start the class. But before I do that, if there are any doubts or any questions that you people have from the previous class, please let me know. Any concerns or any doubts that you have from the last class that we had conducted. If there are any questions, please let me know, so that I can proceed further and talk about the linkages of organized crime and terrorism as far as India is concerned. So I am hoping and I'm guessing that you people have had a look at the papers that have come until now. Of course, I believe that paper 4 of ethics and aptitude just got finished a few minutes back, so we don't have access to the papers as of now. But have you people been able to have a look at paper 3 paper for this year, जो आज सुबह 9 से 12 हुआ? Have you people been able to have a look at it? And if you can tell me that if what is your view, what do you think about that particular paper? Questions are relatively very simple. There is one question that has been asked about money laundering, and they have asked essentially how globalization and the emerging technologies have started to play a crucial role in promoting money laundering and the kind of challenges that they are posing. We discussed about it already. I discussed with you about cryptocurrencies also, how they are posing a challenge as far as the entire issue of money laundering is concerned. And then another question that was asked was the role of state and non-state actors in the challenges that they are creating to India's internal security. Then there was one question on terrorism, right? What are the causes? What is the nexus that terrorism has with the organized crime, and what are the ways to deal with it? And then there was one question on cyber terrorism, right? And the cyber warfare as well, that there are cross-border cyber attacks that are taking place. So I believe that you people have had a look at those particular questions, and you would realize that after covering the classes and the syllabus of internal security with me in these classes, you will find that you will be able to deal with 99% of these questions. Of course, see, the answers are going to differ from one candidate to other, depending upon what all statistics, what all schemes of the government, what all recent examples that you can cite in your answers, and that is what is going to make one candidate's answer stand apart from the other candidate's answer, and that is what is going to exactly determine who will get 100 plus and who is going to get 80 to 90 marks or whatever the average marks in general studies paper 3. That is what actually separates out one particular candidate from the other particular candidate. But before I proceed to talk about today's topic, are there any questions that you people have from the previous classes? Are there any difficulties that you people have faced from the previous classes? If the class coordinators can please tell me if there are any doubts or any questions from the previous classes, and then I can proceed further. Right? You should have a look at this year's question paper. The one for 2021 examination, mains examination. 4 questions asked from internal security, and pretty solid, pretty good questions have been asked from internal security this year. So you would see those questions and you will be able to figure out on the basis of having a preliminary look as well. And in fact, 1 or 2 topics have already been covered by us as a part of our classes. So you should be able to attend, let's say for example, the question on money laundering now. The question that has been asked this year in today's examination. Right? The role of cryptocurrency in money laundering. We discussed this. I discussed this. Can any one of you respond how cryptocurrency can also promote money laundering? Think about it. It's a very simple thing, right? हमने ये discuss भी किया था class के अंदर. That what cryptocurrencies or any of the new technologies do is that it makes it very easy to transfer money from one place to another. See, when we were discussing about cryptocurrency in the last class, I told you that there is layering that is happening. Now layering is basically where you are building one transaction over the other, and where it is very difficult for the agencies and authorities to decide where originally the money has come from. So cryptocurrencies help in moving around money from one part of the world to the other, and because cryptocurrency is not regulated, because there is no kind of government regulation which is still there on cryptocurrencies in many part of the world, it becomes very easy to change the mode of the money. And also cryptocurrency is something that can be used for making certain purchases in the dark web as well. So what you could be doing is that you could be purchasing and selling some real luxury assets and expensive assets in the dark web space as well, as a result of using the cryptocurrencies, right? So that is one aspect that can be mentioned. The other aspect is of course that cryptocurrencies also, because the amount of value that is involved in one Bitcoin or one, any of these cryptocurrencies that are coming in, could be Ethereum or any of these, it is so high, then hiding large amount of money becomes much more easier, right? Is something that you also need to keep in mind when we talk about cryptocurrency. So cryptocurrency has posed a significant challenge in terms of combating money laundering. And then of course UPSC this year's in today's paper also asked a question on the impact of globalization as well. So again, the same thing, what globalization has done is that the newer forms of communication and moving around from one part of the world to the other has become so easy that money laundering has also become much easier because of that. Now what is happening is that there is, अगर पहले हवाला नेटवर्क का जो हवाला ट्रांजैक्टर्स का नेटवर्क जो था वो विद इन द कंट्री लोकेटेड था, नाउ इट इज लोकेटेड ऑल अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड, राइट? एंड बिकॉज नाउ दे आर एबल टू कम्युनिकेट विद ईच अदर विद द हेल्प ऑफ द technology, with the help of the spread of globalization, it has, these ideas related to money laundering, hawala transaction, etc. have been spreading wide and far, as a result of which overcoming and combating money laundering has become even much more tougher for the security agencies across the world. So that is also something that needs to be highlighted in that particular question, right? Any other question that you people have? Any other doubt which is there? Right? So anyway, so we will have a discussion on these particular topics as we go ahead. Now let's continue our discussion from where we had left in the last class, and that was basically about the topic of organized crime and terrorism and linkages between organized crime and terrorism. Now we have discussed that how organized crime and terrorism have a holy or an unholy nexus with each other, which is posing great problems for the security agencies across the world, including India, right? Earlier, where there was one particular group which the security agencies were supposed to deal with, now there are two, and now it's acting like a force multiplier when it comes to the security agencies and the terrorist organization. Both of them have joined hands together, as a result of which it has become even much more tougher to combat against them. It has become even much more tougher to fight against them, right? So that is something that we need to keep in mind when we talk about the unholy nexus which has been developing between organized crime and terrorism. Now when we talk in context of India, there also it is very, very important to understand it is important to understand that how the organized crime and terrorism show their linkages in case of India. So as we know, there are three major internal security issues that face India, right? Three major internal security issues. Of course, there are a number of issues that are facing India's internal security agencies, but three major internal security concerns that face India today are militancy and terrorism in Kashmir, then we have Naxalism, and then insurgency in Northeast. Now each three of them, you would realize that there are significant linkages that have been developed between organized crime and terrorism. So let's talk about these linkages that have developed between these various agencies and the terrorist groups and the organized criminal groups in India. So when we talk about Naxal affected areas, okay, so अब हम India के context में specifically बात करने जा रहे हैं that how linkages or what are the implications of the linkages between organized criminal groups and terrorist groups when it comes to India. Okay, we'll come to it. So question from Arun is that can you please elaborate upon what value adds can be written in internal security other than the theory we cover? देखो यार ऐसा है ना कि there are so many things which are supposed to be written, right? तो एक जब हम कुछ questions देखेंगे previous year के तो उसके अंदर discuss करेंगे, you people will get an idea of what all can be written there. ठीक है, so we'll come to that particular question in a bit. Anyway, so let's talk about, पहले इसके ऊपर अभी focus करते हैं अब please don't send me any questions for now. Question का समय खत्म हो गया, पहले ये अब deal करते हैं इसके साथ. Now when we talk about the linkages between organized criminal groups and terror groups when it comes to Naxal affected areas, what are the kind of linkages that have developed? See, first and foremost, what we need to understand is that a lot of illegal mining that is happening in the Naxal affected areas, which is being done by the mining mafia. So as we know that most of the Naxal affected areas in India are also mineral rich regions. So there is a mining mafia that exists in these areas which has been involved in illegal mining of the natural resources in these areas. The interesting thing is that this mining mafia, which can also be called as a form of organized criminal group. So there are multiple organized criminal groups which are involved in illegal mining in Naxal affected areas. They have developed strong linkages with the Naxal groups. Okay, they have developed strong linkages with Naxal groups in India. In fact, many of these illegal mining mafia enjoy the patronage and protection of the Naxal groups. Okay, so Naxal groups provide patronage and protection to many of these mining mafia operational in Naxal affected areas, and in return what do the Naxal groups get? Naxal groups get a share in the revenue by the sale of these natural resources. Whatever the revenue that is coming in by the sale of natural resources, that is being shared with the Naxal groups in India. So there is a patronage protection, there is a client patronage kind of a system that has been set up where the Naxal groups are providing patronage and protection to the mining mafia, and in return they are getting share in the revenue of these mining mafia which they are getting by selling these natural resources. So that is one. Second, what has been seen is that the Naxal groups have also been providing patronage to a number of other organized criminal groups in these areas who have been involved in the winning of various contracts and bids with the government. So जो बहुत सारे government projects हैं, government bids हैं, उनके अंदर बहुत जो organized criminal groups हैं, a number of these organized criminal groups are getting access to the various tenders and are getting access to the various are winning the various bids for the government projects simply because there is a lot of threat and coercion that is involved from the Naxal groups. So Naxal groups are involved in threatening the public officials. So you can write this. Naxal groups are involved in threatening the public officials so that, this may not be visible completely to some of you, threatening the public officials so that these public officials would award contracts to the various organized criminal groups that are involved in different activities. Okay, so that is something that we can mention here when we talk about the implication of linkages between the organized criminal groups and the terror groups with respect to India. Okay, तो एक aspect हम यहाँ पे ये भी mention कर सकते हैं when we talk about linkages between organized criminal groups and terrorist groups in India. Other than that, what we also need to keep in mind is that Naxals themselves have started to get involved in extortion, kidnapping, abductions, etc. and that has become a major source of revenue for them. In fact, as I had told to you in the first class that where we were discussing about Naxalism, Naxals are involved in levying a fee, an extortion fee that they levy on all the people residing in Naxal affected areas, which is called as the levy. Now that is also a form of organized crime or an organized criminal activity. So Naxals impose an extortion fee called a levy, and therefore they are also involved in extortion from the localites, from the local population, which can also be cited as an example of organized crime. It can also be given as an example of organized crime or organized criminal activity. And then of course, the large extent of area where cannabis cultivation takes place in India today, cannabis trade and a large production of cannabis that takes place in India takes place in Naxal affected areas. So today Naxalites, just like the Taliban, just like the ISIS, are now also involved in controlling large amount of cannabis trade and cannabis production in India. So this very clearly shows that how the organized criminal groups in India have developed a very strong linkage as far as the Naxal problem is concerned. Naxalism has been given a boost as a result of its developing linkages with the organized criminal groups. Then apart from that, you can also talk about that Naxals are also involved in wildlife trafficking. You can mention that. You can also talk about they are involved in the illegal logging and lumbering from the forests wherever they control the particular area. So you can talk about wildlife trafficking. Right? Sorry. You can talk about wildlife trafficking. You can also talk about illegal logging and lumbering activities in Naxal affected areas, dense forest areas, right? So all of these things are also being seen in Naxal affected areas. So if UPSC asks us a question where they ask us to elaborate upon the linkages that have developed between the Naxal groups and between the organized criminal groups and the problem that we see with respect to organized crime and terrorism emerging in India, you can give one example of Naxal affected areas. I hope that this is clear to all of you. You can give multiple examples now. Whatever we have discussed here can be given as multiple type of examples to explain this. Now let's move to Northeast India. Okay, what are the linkages that have developed between the organized criminal groups and terror groups as far as Northeast India is concerned? So from time immemorial, the insurgent groups in Northeast India have been involved in organized criminal activity themselves. Either they have been involved in organized criminal activity themselves or they have been supporting organized criminal activity such as human trafficking, such as smuggling of arms, such as narco trafficking. Now, narco trafficking is one major threat poser to India's internal security, because see, what you have to understand about narco trafficking and the relationship of narco trafficking with terrorism is even a more dangerous cocktail, because there are two ways in which the society gets damaged. One is through the forces of terrorism, one is through insurgency, one is through violence, and the second is the violence that is taking place in the society from within by the use of the drugs and by the spread of the usage of the drugs among the youth of the country. Okay, so that is what we can be mentioning here when we talk about Northeast India, that how the linkages between the organized criminal groups and the terror groups have been developing in Northeast India. So narco trafficking, trafficking in human beings, wildlife, etc. There are a number of these activities which the insurgent groups in Northeast are themselves involved in, right? Or they are actively supporting various organized criminal groups, those who are involved in these activities in Northeast India. The other thing is that terror groups are also involved in extortion, bribe giving and abductions as well. In fact, the report by Ministry of Home Affairs as well as by the Standing Committee on the Security Situation in Northeast can write down the Parliamentary Standing Committee and the report by Ministry of Home Affairs. Standing Committee report on security situation in Northeast. Both have worryingly pointed out that a large number of former insurgent groups and members of former insurgent groups, after having surrendered to the government, after having given up on insurgency, are still involved in ways or are still involved in number of organized criminal activities. For example, the Standing Committee report on the security situation in Northeast mentions that Arunachal Pradesh, which has not witnessed any kind of insurgency in the past, has been witnessing spillover effects that I discussed with you earlier as well, where the former insurgent groups in the region are now trying to establish their presence in Arunachal Pradesh, and now the number of violent incidents such as cases of abduction, such as cases of killing, such as cases of extortion, such as cases of contract killings, etc. have gone up significantly in Arunachal Pradesh in the last few years. So that is a major concern that we need to keep in mind, that how the organized criminal activity is now being promoted by former insurgent groups in the region. So not only the fact that the active insurgent groups are themselves involved in having strong linkages with organized criminal groups operating in Northeast India, they are having a very active linkage, plus they are also themselves involved in trafficking in drugs or trafficking in human beings, etc. But at the same time, the other issue that needs to be highlighted is that former insurgent groups are also getting involved in a number of organized criminal activities in Northeast India, which is also a major concern. Okay, so that can also be highlighted by you. And then terror groups help the organized criminal groups to move to and fro between India and Myanmar, and the same is the situation applicable for the organized criminal groups helping the terror groups as well. There are a number of well-established trafficking routes. So in your answers, you can mention about that there are number of well-established trafficking routes to which the organized criminals have good access to. There are number of well-established trafficking routes to which organized criminals have good access to. And now organized criminal groups are allowing the terror groups and are allowing the insurgent groups in Northeast to use these particular routes for their movement to and fro between India and Myanmar, and vice versa as well. So here also in Northeast India, we see that there is a very dangerous relationship that is developing between organized criminal groups and terror groups, both of cooperation as well as of confluence. Okay, so now let's move on to Kashmir. Now situation in Kashmir is very different from Northeast India insurgency there and from the situation of Naxalism in Central India. The reason for that is because in Kashmir, these linkages between organized criminal groups and terror groups have not deepened as such. One of the main reasons for that is in Kashmir, terror groups are not dependent upon the organized criminal groups or organized criminal activity for their survival. And the reason for that is there is state sponsorship of terrorism in Kashmir already. Pakistan has been sponsoring terrorism through various ways, through training, through providing of manpower, through providing of equipment, through providing of arms and ammunition and logistic support, etc. anyway. So the linkages between organized criminal groups and terror groups in Kashmir have not become as strong as in case of Naxalism or in case of insurgency in Northeast India. So that is something that we need to keep in mind, and that is what I have mentioned here in the notes as well, that external state sponsorship of militancy is existent in Kashmir, and hence the dependence on organized crime for funds is minimal as far as the terror groups is concerned. Remember, I told you that one of the reasons because of which terror groups have developed strong linkages with organized criminal groups in the past few decades is because of their requirement to get access to funds and to sources of funds. Now, that need is already being fulfilled by the state sponsorship that is being provided to terrorism by the ISI of Pakistan, and therefore that can also be mentioned here when we talk about the aspects related to the linkages between organized criminal groups and terror groups when it comes to Kashmir. But we also need to keep in mind that terror groups in Kashmir are acting as carriers for fake Indian currency notes to come into India. Large swathes of fake Indian currency notes have been making their way into India from Pakistan, and that is happening with the help of the terror groups that are operational in Kashmir. So yes, it is fair to say that the linkages between organized criminal groups and terror groups in Kashmir are not as strong as that maybe in case of insurgency in Northeast, but there are elements of organized criminal activity that are being performed by the terror groups in Kashmir as well. That is something that can be mentioned. And then you can also mention about drug trafficking across the border is also something which is being promoted by the terror groups. Number of terror groups across the border, especially across the India-Pakistan border in Punjab, in Rajasthan, Gujarat, are involved in drug trafficking activities as well. And then of course the issue of stone pelting as well. Number of organized criminal groups and mafia are involved in organizing the stone pelting incidents in Kashmir, right? And they are having very strong linkages with the militant groups and terror groups in Kashmir. So that is also something that can be highlighted. Another thing that you can also mention about is that many of these terror organizations in Kashmir have their front faces, which we call as over the ground workers. Okay. So many of the terror organizations in Kashmir have their front faces in form of over the ground workers. So these are essentially people, those who are helping the terror organizations, but they are doing it in such a manner that they are not being suspected upon by the security agencies. Say for example, a number of these over the ground workers would be helping the terror organizations in gathering funds for themselves, would be helping the terror organizations in recruitment, in spreading their propaganda, in providing them logistic supports, etc. But these over the ground workers are actually operating under the garb of some civil society organization or some religious organization or some NGO in Kashmir or in the valley, and covertly they are supporting the terrorist groups. Covertly they are supporting the militants, but overtly they would appear to be doing some kind of philanthropic activity, some kind of society, community work, etc. One example that you people should be knowing about is, say for example, Jamaat-ud-Dawa. Now Jamaat-ud-Dawa is an organization that claims to be an NGO in Pakistan, but what has been pointed out in reports by Indian intelligence agencies from time to time is that Jamaat-ud-Dawa has been involved in raising funds for various terror activities in Kashmir and in the nearby region, right? So that is also one angle that we need to keep in mind, that how civil society organizations, NGOs, etc. have also developed very strong linkages with the terror organizations in Kashmir, as a result of which they are providing them a number of support, including the logistic support, fundraising support, recruitment support, etc., even though they are remaining over the ground and they have not been cracked down upon by the security agencies or by the authorities in India. So that is another thing that can be mentioned. So these are the linkages that exist between organized criminal groups and terror groups in India. One with respect to Naxal affected areas, second with respect to the insurgency ridden areas in Northeast, and third with respect to the Kashmir and the militancy and the entire terrorist activities that have been taking place in Kashmir, right? So these are some of the pointers that can be mentioned by you if you have to talk about implication of linkages between organized criminal groups and terror groups when it concerns India's situation specifically. Yes? Any questions that you people may have related to whatever we have discussed till here, please let me know. Any questions, any doubts that you people may have related to whatever we have discussed till here, please feel free to ask. And you can note down these pointers in the meantime. there is one question that has come in. What is that? The question is that how illegal mining conducted in tribal areas, and sir, how OCGs take tender from government. Wherein certain linkages be cited as false propaganda of Naxalite. As what I didn't get the question. How illegal mining is conducted in tribal areas? What do you mean by how illegal mining is conducted in tribal areas? What is the question? Illegal mining is conducted under the watchful eye of the bureaucrats, of the politicians, because there is a whole mafia that exists in these areas, right? I mean, what is the question? What do you mean by how illegal mining is conducted? Question का मतलब क्या है? Illegal mining is conducted because it is being conducted illegally, where the security, see, you have to understand that a large number of these areas which are controlled by the Naxals, they are out of bounds for the security agencies and for the administrative agencies in India. Okay, in fact many of them are famously called as Pakistan also, simply because of the reason because the security agencies and the administrative agencies never venture into these areas because they are under complete control and dominance of the Naxals. So these are mineral rich regions where illegal mining is being conducted without having any mining licenses. Number of illegal mining mafia are operating in these areas. Illegal mining कैसे होती है? सैंड माइनिंग माफिया के बारे में आपने सुना होगा, जो खनन होता है, अवैध खनन होता है रिवर बेड के ऊपर सैंड का, वो कैसे होता है, राइट? उसके अलावा और क्या है? हाउ OCGs टेक टेंडर फ्रॉम द गवर्नमेंट. Mansi, I would request that when you send questions to me, please, rephrase the question and send it to me. Please do not send it to me as it is, as that has been asked by the students. Okay. How OCGs take tender from government means institutional criteria is not that. See, you have to understand one thing. Institutional criteria, whatever is there on paper is one thing, but what happens on ground is something else. Organized criminal groups are enjoying the patronage of politicians, bureaucrats, Naxalites. Bureaucrats are being forced that if you do not award this particular contract or if this particular bid does not go to this particular group. And organized criminal group का मतलब ये नहीं कि मतलब जिन organizations को ये contracts award किए जा रहे हैं वो outrightly criminal organizations हैं. They may be having a front face of themselves where they are enjoying the support and the patronage of the terrorists or the Naxalites behind the scenes. I gave you an example also. मणिपुर के अंदर एक ऑफिसर ने जब मुझे ये बात बोली कि डिस्ट्रिक्ट हॉस्पिटल का टेंडर मैंने कैंसिल कर दिया पुराने कॉन्ट्रैक्टर का, तो वो बंदा अपने गुंडे भेज के, वो आदमी इंसर्जेंट्स भेज के मुझे धमकाने की कोशिश कर रहा था that you have awarded this contract to a new contractor, I will not let this happen. This officer had to deploy 70 security personnel on the site of the construction of the district hospital because he was fearing for the security of the new contractor and the construction activity that was taking place at the district hospital. Right? So that is how these linkages are developing. It's not necessary कि जो contractor है, आप समझते हो, जो बड़े सारे जो contractors हैं खुद they are having the support and they are having the backing of the Naxal groups or the insurgent groups, as a result of which they are able to involve themselves in a number of illegal activities which they would not have been able to do otherwise. Right? So that is what we need to keep in mind. Anyway, yes, any other questions that are there? Okay, now let's proceed further. So what we need to also discuss further is that what are the challenges that we face as a country in dealing with organized crime? What are the reasons because of which we have not been able to deal with the organized criminal groups in India? So first and foremost, what we need to mention here is that inadequate legal framework that exists in India in order to deal with the organized criminal groups and organized crime. If we look at the sections or the provisions of Indian Penal Code, provisions of Indian Penal Code are inadequate in dealing with organized crime. The reason for that is Because the Indian Penal Code does not define organized crime as an activity. When there is no definition of a particular crime, when there is no definition that has been provided for the organized criminal activity in the Indian Penal Code, the legal provisions are not strong enough in India to deal with organized criminal activity. Therefore, special laws have to be enacted. But the unfortunate reality is that only a handful of states in India, only a handful of states in India have enacted laws to specifically tackle organized crime. And see, you cannot be dealing with organized criminals with your regular laws and with your regular legal mechanisms anyway. You need some stringent provisions in place to deal with organized criminals. These are hardened criminals. You probably require access to these criminals for a longer period of time under police custody as compared to the petty criminals or as compared to the regular criminals. Similarly, one more thing that you need to keep in mind is that the Indian Penal Code does not define the offense of organized crime. So it becomes very difficult to establish the legal liability of these organized criminal groups in India, because there are inadequate laws that exist in India. So that is what can be mentioned here, that only a handful of states in India have enacted special laws. I told you about Maharashtra having enacted a law. Then Karnataka adopted the same law. Delhi has adopted the same law. Gujarat very recently got a law to deal with organized crime. Many other states in India still do not have a law to deal with organized crime. They are still grappling with what law should be applicable on the organized criminals. And if you read through the Indian Penal Code, आपको मिलेगा section 34 of the Indian Penal Code that talks about group liability. That is the only provision where a group of people may be held liable for a criminal act. Other than that, there are no provisions that exist in the Indian Penal Code to deal with organized criminal activities. Until the time you do not have strong laws in place to deal with organized criminals and to deal with organized criminal activities, it would remain a very uphill task to fight against these organized criminals. So weak and inadequate legal framework. Now, what should be the suggestion here that you should be providing here? That either the center should enact a model legislation related to organized crime and organized criminal groups, and then this model legislation may be picked up or may be taken up by the states, and that can provide the framework that the states need in order to enact their own laws. Because policing and law and order is a state subject. It is completely the prerogative of the states to enact a law on organized crime. But states have had a very laid back attitude on this particular issue. And see, you have to understand, if you want to deal with organized crime, you cannot be tackling it on a state to state basis. You have to deal with the problem of organized crime in a national and a very comprehensive manner. Your outlook to deal with so you should mention the outlook to deal with organized crime and organized criminal groups should be national and not regional. We should not have a regional or a local approach to deal with organized crime and organized criminal activities in India. We should have a national outlook to deal with the same. The reason for that is today organized criminal groups are transnational in nature. Many of them are operating beyond the boundaries of one particular nation. How can you expect to fight against the organized criminal groups if your approach within the country itself is fragmented? If there are a lot of variations in the laws from one state to another to deal with organized criminal groups, you will find it very difficult to hold them accountable and to bring them to books. You need to have a standard approach. You need to have a uniform approach all across the country to deal with organized crime. You cannot have different and piecemeal approach being adopted by different states when all these organized criminal groups are operating under one umbrella. आपकी सिक्योरिटी एजेंसीज अलग अलग डायरेक्शंस में काम कर रही हैं, डिफरेंट स्टेट्स की, सेंटर की, और ऑर्गेनाइज क्रिमिनल ग्रुप्स एक साथ जुड़े हुए हैं. They are working together hand in hand with each other. Then it will become very difficult to deal with organized criminal groups and to eliminate organized crime from India. So that is what you should mention, that we need to have a national outlook. मैं suggestions भी साथ साथ बता रहा हूँ, right? And we need to enact strong laws in order to deal with the organized criminal groups and organized criminal activity in India. The other thing that you need to mention is that, see, the onus of combating against organized criminal groups falls squarely on the shoulders of the state police forces and state police agencies. But are the state police agencies in India equipped well enough and trained properly to combat against the organized criminals? Without having access to proper equipment, without having access to the proper machinery, would they be able to fight against the organized criminal groups? Organized criminals are now having access to sophisticated machinery such as the machine guns, etc. Whereas our state police machinery is still not having access to proper guns. They have to rely upon manual weapons in order to fight against the organized criminals. That is something which is creating a distorted playing field. So therefore it is important to upgrade the capacity of the state police forces. See, some of the state police forces, what they have done in order to tackle this particular issue is that they have created special cells within their police department which are specifically focused on organized crime. So say for example, when you look at the Mumbai police, or say for example when you look at Delhi police, special cells have been created to deal with organized criminals and organized criminal activities, where the members of these special cells are being provided special training which is required to fight against these hardened criminals such as the organized criminals. Then difficulty in obtaining proof. Now see, this is a very, very important point. I told you that organized criminal groups are hierarchical organizations, right? There is a very deep hierarchy structure that runs into these organized criminal groups. So even though you may be able to catch the foot soldier of the organization, you may be able to catch the abductor, you may be able to catch the contract killer who may be working on the ground for an organized criminal group, but to catch hold of the don, to catch hold of the leader of the pack is very difficult because of the difficulty in obtaining proof against the leader of these organizations. Often leader of these organizations hide behind some kind of a business or some kind of a legal activity, as a result of which it is very difficult to prove their complicity in organized crime. You must have seen that series on Amazon, Mirzapur. How difficult it is to catch hold of the don. The entire town knows, the entire city knows that this person is don, he is involved in illegal activity, but to catch hold of him is extremely difficult. The reason for that is because obtaining proof against them is very difficult, because these organizations work in such a manner that you may be able to prove the guilt of the person who's working on the ground, but to prove the guilt of the person who's directing all of these individuals and who's running the entire organization and who's running the entire show becomes very difficult. Then growth in technology has also made it very difficult to deal with organized crime and organized criminals, because of growth in technology and because of the globalization, it has become very easy for these organized criminals to move to and fro between countries. And because extradition laws and the extradition treaties that India has with the other countries are so less and few, a number of times these organized criminals can run away to some other countries from where their extradition to India can become a major challenge. Abu Salem ke case mein, when he went away to Portugal, to get him extradited back to India was a very, very big task for the Indian security agencies. So because we do not have proper extradition treaties that have been signed with the other nations of the world. So there is lack of cooperation between the nations as well when it comes to dealing with organized criminals. And as I told you that today organized criminal groups are not operational in one country alone. They are operational in multiple countries, as a result of which they may commit crime in one country and they may run away to the other country, and their extradition to the country where they have committed crime will become very difficult because of this, because of the lack of these extradition treaties, etc. So growth in technology has also spurred the activity of the organized criminal groups, and it has made it really difficult for the security agencies to deal with organized criminals and organized criminal groups. And then lastly, the nexus between organized criminals, politicians, bureaucrats also makes it very difficult to crack down against the organized criminals because there are vested interests that are involved. Number of organized criminals are in fact in politics themselves. Number of organized criminals are sponsoring the political campaigns of politicians and political parties in India. As a result of which, it is very difficult to crack down against these organized criminals because they enjoy the patronage and support of the state agencies. Investigation agencies, police agencies usually tend to go very slow and usually tend to go very soft against these organized criminals because they have deep linkages with bureaucrats and politicians in the country, right? So that is also something that can be mentioned by you when we talk about challenges that exist with respect to dealing with organized crime and organized criminal groups in India, right? अगर आप इतने points भी mention कर दोगे एक दो examples के साथ, and if UPSC asks you certain suggestions in order to deal with organized crime, अगर आप इतना भी mention कर दोगे, that should be more than enough in order to impress the examiner, right? So this is the topic of linkages between organized criminal group and terror group. ठीक है? Some of you are asking about overground workers. क्या question क्या है? What explanation do you want? आप specific question पूछा कीजिए. अगर आप हवा के अंदर बात छोड़ दोगे तो मुश्किल हो जाएगी. Overground workers कौन होते हैं? Overground workers are those people, represent those organizations which are supporters of the terror groups, which are supporters of the insurgent groups, extremist groups, but they operate in the society in an over the ground manner. There would be NGOs, there would be civil society organizations, there would be various private entities who may be covertly supporting the activities of the terror organizations, but they are doing a legitimate activity or business in front of the entire society. That is what is called as over the ground workers. Now in Kashmir especially, we see that there are large number of over the ground workers, those who are helping and aiding the functioning of the terror groups and militant groups in Kashmir, those who work behind the scenes. Okay, so that is what I was trying to highlight here. Okay. Any other questions that you have related to this particular topic, because we are done with the topic of linkages between organized crime and terrorism. Yes, any questions? Now, the next topic that I will be dealing with is the basics of cyber security. So, इस particular topic के अंदर जो हमें चीज़ ध्यान रखनी है वो ये है कि questions that are asked are very simple. Okay? आप 2013 से जब से पैटर्न चेंज हुआ एग्जामिनेशन का और ये सब टॉपिक सिलेबस के अंदर आए हैं, तब से आप अभी तक क्वेश्चन देखोगे तो क्वेश्चंस लिटरली लार्जली सेम ही हैं. इनफैक्ट आज भी जो क्वेश्चन पूछा गया अक्रॉस द बॉर्डर टेरर अटैक, साइबर टेरर थ्रेट्स के बारे में, वो बहुत ही ज्यादा एक्सपेक्टेड क्वेश्चन था. लास्ट नाइट आई एंडेड अप शेयरिंग अ फ्यू expected questions or expected themes on internal security for this year on my Telegram group. And see, I'm not claiming that I am a truthsayer or I am someone who knows what is going to come in the examination, but मुझे कहीं ना कहीं एक्सपेक्टेशन थी कि इन 3-4 टॉपिक्स के ऊपर क्वेश्चन आएंगे, और मैंने 5 थीम शेयर करी थी कल. somehow by stroke of luck or by coincidence उन 5 थीम्स में से 4 के ऊपर क्वेश्चन आ गए. राइट, अब थीम्स पे क्वेश्चन आए, मैं ये प्रिडिक्ट नहीं कर सकता कि क्वेश्चन क्या आएगा. दैट इज वेरी डिफिकल्ट टू प्रिडिक्ट. बट मुझे ये पता था कि मनी लॉन्ड्रिंग और टेक्नोलॉजी वगैरह से रिलेटेड, क्रिप्टो करेंसी से क्वेश्चन आएगा रिलेटेड. आई वॉज एक्सपेक्टिंग वन क्वेश्चन ऑन द इशू ऑफ साइबर टेररिज्म, साइबर वॉरफेयर, बिकॉज इट हैज बीन इन न्यूज सो मच. देन आई वॉज एक्सपेक्टिंग वन क्वेश्चन ऑन ग्लोबल टेररिज्म, राइट. सो वो आ गया. सो it just ended up happening by stroke of luck or by coincidence that yesterday I shared 5 themes और उसमें से 4 क्वेश्चन जो है वो एज इट इज जो है उन 5 में से 4 थीम्स के ऊपर क्वेश्चन आ गए. आई एम अगेन नॉट सेइंग कि नेक्स्ट टाइम अगर मैं ऐसा बोलूंगा तो तब भी ऐसा ही होगा, बट दिस इज जस्ट सम थिंग दैट आई बिलीव्ड would be as related to this. Okay, now let's start with the topic of basics of cyber security. Okay, so first and foremost what I want to discuss with you in this topic is, what do we understand by cyber security? So if any one of you can define on the response chat, what do you understand by cyber security? What is the meaning of cyber security to you people? How do you define cyber security? What is the meaning? How will you be defining, or how will you be explaining the term cyber security? What does the term cyber security means to you? Yes, please tell me. Definition of cyber security. How do we define cyber security? Yes, please tell me. बताइए, how do you define cyber security? What is the meaning of cyber security to you? अरे यार फालतू की ये सब कॉन्वर्सेशंस मत करते रहा करो चैट के ऊपर. जो क्वेश्चन है उसका आंसर दो आप लोग, है ना. आप जो ये लोग ऐसे करते रहते हो ना, उससे आप खुद तो डिस्ट्रैक्टेड हो ही, आप और स्टूडेंट्स को भी डिस्ट्रैक्ट करते हो, तो गलत है ये बात. Protecting the system from digital attacks and malware. Okay, what else? Anyone else who wants to give any other definition of cyber security? Protection of information. Protection of information. So I am carrying some book with me on the road. When I am trying to protect it from you, that you steal it from me, that is what is called as cyber security. That's the definition that I am going by, what you have given. What is the meaning of cyber security? आपने ऐसे डिफाइन किया है. और बताओ. यस, एनीवन एल्स हु कैन डिफाइन? illegal activity on computers, security of internet related, protecting the cyber infrastructure of the country, protection of data from any malware or virus, protecting the critical digital ecosystem, protecting systems data from attacks. What kind of attacks? Protection of information data in cyberspace. So see, cyber security refers to, if you look at definition of cyber security as per the IT Act of 2000, Information Technology Act of 2000, you will find the definition of cyber security there, which says that protection of information, protection of computer systems, devices, networks, protection of information, computer systems, devices, networks, and all the data that is stored, information and data that is stored on these devices, computer system, networks, etc. from unauthorized access, use, unauthorized access, use, destruction, disruption, or modification is what is termed as cyber security. So protection of computer systems, devices, networks, and the information and data stored on these devices, networks, etc. from what? From unauthorized access, unauthorized use, destruction, disruption, or modification is what is termed as cyber security. That is what is the meaning of the term cyber security, right? Protection of information, data, computer systems, devices, networks, etc. from unauthorized access. Unauthorized access, use, destruction, disruption, or modification is termed as cyber security. Now, the question that arises is that why is cyber security so crucial or so important for India? So let us talk about importance of cyber security for India. Why as a nation we should be emphasizing on cyber security? See, there are a number of things that can be mentioned here. First and foremost, you can talk about the economic importance of cyberspace and cyber security for India. You can mention that we are now moving towards being a digital economy. We have made various initiatives in order to digitize the economy in India. Especially you can talk about that the entire fintech revolution that is taking place in the world is emanating from India today. Considering this, it becomes very, very important to have cyber security measures in place to maintain the robust fintech industry that is coming up in India. Today, we are gradually moving towards a digital economy. India is witnessing a fintech finance technology revolution today, and India is the leader of the fintech revolution in the world. If we want to ensure that this fintech revolution continues and thrives, it is important that we have strong cyber security measures in place, right? So that is one aspect that can be mentioned by you about why cyber security is so crucial and so important for India. Then other than that, you should also talk about the fact that cyber security is also important because of various governance related measures that are being introduced in India. Various e-governance measures that have been introduced by the government to make governance accessible to the people through the use of information and technology also makes it important that we have strong cyber security measures in place in India. You can talk about the UIDAI project. Right? Or you can just simply say the Aadhaar project. We have the largest citizen identity program in the world. Now, there is sensitive information, biometric information, private information of the citizens. Personal data of citizens is being stored in this Aadhaar database. And if we do not have proper cyber security measures in place, there is a possibility that this data may land into hands of some criminal elements, and therefore it may lead to misuse of this data. Right? So that is another reason that can be mentioned. You can also talk about, say for example, the smart cities program. For the success of smart cities program, it is important that the cyber security measures are strong and robust enough. You can also talk about that how the government has taken a number of initiatives under the National E-Governance program. You can also talk about National E-Governance program 2.0. In order to ensure the proper functioning of these various e-governance programs that have been taken by government, again, it is important that cyber security measures should be strong enough, right? So that is also something that can be mentioned by you when we talk about the importance of cyber security for a nation such as India. Then other than that, you can also talk about that, see, that अगर हम सिर्फ इन दोनों पर्सपेक्टिव से बात ना करें, बट अगर हम बात करें सिक्योरिटी रिलेटेड पर्सपेक्टिव से भी, टुडे we are deploying technology in various security related measures as well. Say for example, now the government has started to explore the use of drone technology for the surveillance in the border areas, for the surveillance in crowded spaces in the markets, etc. There also it is important that cyber security measures are robust enough. Otherwise, all this data that is being captured by drones may fall into wrong hands. So cyber security is very important from the perspective of security as well. You can also mention that how today we are now moving towards an era of collecting intelligence. Collection of intelligence from the various e-sources is also under a threat if you do not have proper cyber security measures in place. Then on top of that, आप ये भी कह सकते हो कि see, look at the number of users of internet in India. India has the third largest internet users in the world. We have the third largest internet users in the world. We have the third largest smartphone population in the world. More and more people are getting connected to internet in India, and that is posing even more threats on the cyber security front. So therefore, importance of cyber security can be seen from the fact that today our entire economy, our entire governance, our internal security measures, as well as the well-being of our entire population to a large extent is dependent upon the use of internet and the use of technology. And if cyber security measures, if the cyber security architecture of this country is not robust enough, we would not be able to deal with the various cyber threats that can be posed to these various initiatives that we have taken on the technology front. India's growth as a country, India's growth as an economy can be stalled, can be impacted in a very adverse manner if we do not have a robust cyber security architecture in the country. Okay, so I hope that with the help of some of these pointers, you will be able to explain in the examination why cyber security measures are so crucial for a nation such as India. Right? Now, let's talk about the various cyber threats now. So till now we have discussed what is the definition of cyber security. We have discussed the importance of cyber security for a nation such as India. This is not an exhaustive list. There can be many more points that can be added to it. But now let's talk about the various cyber threats. So various cyber threats which India is exposed to as a nation. Different types of cyber threats that India as a nation is exposed to is what we are going to study now. Okay. So what are the various types of cyber threats that India as a nation is exposed to? First and foremost, you can talk about cyber crimes. second, cyber terrorism, and third, cyber warfare. These are the three major cyber threats that we are going to discuss that face India: cyber crimes, cyber terrorism, and cyber warfare. Yes, but before I proceed, any questions that you people have, anything that you may not have understood, whatever we have discussed till here? Yes, any questions or any doubts till here? यहाँ तक कोई issues हैं तो बताइए, फिर मैं further आगे चलूँगा. Yes, okay. So let's proceed further. Now see, there are three types of cyber threats that we need to be aware of. First one, cyber crime. Second, cyber terrorism, and cyber warfare. Now see, as such, though cyber terrorism and cyber warfare are also cyber crimes. But what we are doing here in order to categorize this is that crimes that are committed with the help of cyberspace, petty crimes that are committed with the help of cyberspace or with the help of technology or in the cyberspace are referred to as cyber crimes. So cyber crimes as such does not have any specific definition, but cyber crimes as a term refers to crimes committed with the help of cyberspace or in the cyberspace. I'll give you an example of both. Crimes that are committed with the help of cyberspace could be the phishing scams that take place. A lot of times people are given calls on the phones and then they are told that, sir, I am calling from so and so bank, etc. and so and so forth, and then they will ask you your important personal information related to the bank account, and then they will use that information in order to cause a financial fraud. That is an example of a cyber crime. Phishing scams are an example of crimes that are committed with the help of cyberspace, with the help of technology. Now, cyber stalking is an example of a crime that is being conducted in the cyberspace. So that is also an example of cyber crime. Cyber stalking, it has been defined in section 354D of the IPC. So recently you people must have heard of this particular app or this particular website called as the Bully Buy app, which has been in news because there was an auction of the Muslim women that was taking place on this particular app called as the Bully Buy app. So people, those who are accused of making this app and operating this app, have been charged under various sections of the Indian Penal Code, including promoting enmity between various sections of the society, also including this offense of cyber stalking. So when you try to follow the movement, when you try to follow the activity of an individual on the cyberspace with the objective of trying to track their movement, with the objective of trying to get some information about them in an unsolicited manner, it will be called as an act of cyber stalking. When you keep sending messages to a girl even when she is not responding, and you try to reach out to her through multiple forums when she is not responding to you, that will be counted as an offense of cyber stalking. Child pornography is also another example of cyber crime. You can also talk about identity theft. A lot of times the identity of individuals is stolen and fake accounts are made on social media and on the various social networking websites. That is also an example of cyber crime. So cyber stalking, child pornography, identity theft, phishing scams, all of these fall under the definition of cyber crimes. You can also mention about hacking, getting access to someone's computer, someone's personal information, someone's data in an unauthorized manner by breaking into someone's system is also what is called as a cyber crime or example of cyber crime. So multiple examples of cyber crimes would be cyber stalking, child pornography, identity theft, hacking, phishing scams, etc. Right? Where either the crime is committed in the cyberspace or the crime is committed with the help of the cyberspace. In both the cases, it will be an example of cyber crime that we need to keep in mind. Right? That is the definition of cyber crimes. Now, let's discuss what is cyber terrorism. Now, section 66F of the IT Act in India provides a definition of cyber terrorism. Section 66F of the Information Technology Act 2000 defines cyber terrorism. So what is the meaning of the term cyber terrorism? Let's have a look at that. Meaning of the term cyber terrorism. So cyber terrorism refers to if any person with the intent of threatening the unity, integrity, sovereignty of India or to strike terror in the minds of the people. When a person, so it says that if I read out section 66F of IT Act for you, it says that whoever with the intent to threaten the unity, integrity, security or sovereignty of India or to strike terror in the people or any section of the people by denying or causing the denial of access to any person authorized to computer resource or attempting to penetrate or access a computer resource without authorization or exceeding authorized access or introducing or causing to introduce any computer contaminant and by means of such conduct causes or is likely to cause death or injuries to persons or damage or destruction of property or disrupt or knowing that it is likely to cause damage or destruction, it would be charged with the offense of the cyber terrorism. So basically, when cyberspace, simple definition of cyber terrorism would be when cyberspace is used to commit activities that have potential to disrupt sovereignty and integrity of India or security of the state or with the intention of creating terror in minds of people, it will be termed as an act of cyber terrorism. When cyberspace is used to commit activities that have potential to disrupt the sovereignty and integrity of India, security of the state, or with the intention of creating terror in the minds of the people, it will be termed as an act of cyber terrorism. One specific example of cyber terrorism that comes in my mind is how Muzaffarnagar riots in India were initiated by the help of spreading doctored videos on the internet. When various doctored videos were spread on the internet during the Muzaffarnagar riots in order to incite hatred and in order to promote enmity between various communities in India, it was an example of cyber terrorism. In fact, today, terrorists are actively using cyberspace for carrying out various terror activities and for promoting the activities of the terror groups. That would also be called as cyber terrorism. For example, today you can mention about how cyberspace is being actively used by the terror groups for activities such as recruitment, fundraising, planning and coordination of terror attacks, okay, recruitment, fundraising, planning and coordination of terror attacks, spreading propaganda of the terror groups. All of this would also fall into the definition of cyber terrorism. Cyber terrorism has emerged as a major significant challenge to India's internal security today, where it is being used to threaten India's internal security. It is being used to threaten the sovereignty and integrity of India as a nation. What are the ways in which cyberspace is being used by the various terror groups for recruitment purposes, fundraising, planning and coordination of the terror attacks, for spreading the propaganda, and for number of other things as well. So when the terror groups use cyberspace in order to strike terror in the minds of people or to affect the sovereignty and integrity of India, that is what is called as cyber terrorism. Cyber terrorism may be caused by non-state actors or by state actors. What we need to keep in mind is that recently, when there was an attack that took place on the power grid in Mumbai, it was when disruption of the power grid in Mumbai was done by a cyber attack. It was nothing but it was an example of cyber terrorism. Okay, सेक्शन 66F के अंदर आपको स्पेसिफिक डेफिनेशन मिलेगी आईटी एक्ट के अंदर साइबर टेररिज्म की. नाउ what do we understand by cyber warfare? See, cyber warfare is composed of two terms, cyber and warfare. When you carry out warfare in cyberspace, that is what is the meaning of the cyber warfare. Basically, originally there were three domains, conventional domains of warfare: air, land and sea. The fourth domain of warfare that got added was space, and the fifth domain of warfare that has got added today is cyber warfare. Cyber warfare refers to a warfare or a war that is initiated by one nation against the other in the cyberspace, where the attempt of one nation, where the attempt is to cause damage to the critical infrastructure of the other nation. Where the attempt is to damage where the effort is to damage the critical infrastructure of the other nation. You can give example of Stuxnet virus. This Stuxnet virus infested the Iranian nuclear program. The Iranian nuclear program was infested by Stuxnet virus, and this Stuxnet virus was a creation of Israel and USA. Israel and USA jointly collaborated with each other in order to create this Stuxnet virus that infested the Iranian nuclear program, and the attempt of this Stuxnet virus was to disrupt the Iranian nuclear program. So the point I am trying to make here is that when nations take warfare to the cyberspace, when they start using cyberspace as a domain or as a place where they would try and cause substantial damage to some other nation's critical infrastructure, to some other nation's economy, it will be called as a case of cyber terrorism. So carrying out warfare in cyberspace with an attempt to cause damage to the critical infrastructure of the other nation is what is called as cyber warfare, an act of cyber warfare. And one thing that you need to understand in cyber warfare is that at least one nation state has to be involved, and the cyber activity has to cross the international borders. Then it will be called as a case of cyber warfare, where the nations are involved in trying to cause substantial damage to the other nation's critical infrastructure. तो इसके अंदर आप बहुत सारे एग्जाम्पल दे सकते हो. इंडिया के रिस्पेक्ट में भी हम बात कर सकते हैं that how the Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust website was infested with a malware, and it is alleged that this malware originated from China. Recently also there was an attack. In fact, in 2013 you can mention there was an attack on the DRDO website that originated from Algeria. China has raised an army of cyber warriors where they are constantly involved in trying to find certain chinks in the armors of the Indian security agencies and their website, and trying to infest these websites with various viruses and with various kind of trojans, etc. You can give example of the exodus of Northeast Indians from Bangalore in 2012 on the basis of morphed videos that are alleged to have originated from Pakistan. Okay. There was a panic that was spread in the people from Northeast India residing in Bangalore, that there is violence that is taking place amongst them, and as a result these people should run away to their homeland. There was a mass exodus of Northeast Indians that took place from Bangalore in the year 2012 on the basis of certain morph videos, the origin of which is linked to Pakistan. In the recent times as well, there have been several attacks that have taken place on the websites of various Indian security agencies which have originated from China. So cyber warfare refers to the carrying out of warfare in the cyberspace by one nation against the other in order to cause damage to its enemy state and in order to cause damage to the economy of the enemy state. So that is an example of what we need to understand by cyber warfare. Exodus of Northeast Indians from Bangladesh, from Bangalore in 2012 could be one example. Stuxnet could be another example. The DRDO website was attacked by the Algerian hackers in 2013 could be another example. China having raised its own army of cyber warriors is also one other example of cyber warfare for which China has been preparing for. Right? So these are the various cyber threats that face India. Okay. First one to begin with, we have so various cyber threats that face India: cyber crimes, cyber terrorism and cyber warfare. I hope that it is clear to all of you, right? See, handwritten notes etc. will be provided to you, so you don't need to worry about the notes here, but this is something that you should keep in mind when we talk about cyber warfare and the various cyber threats that are facing India. Okay, is this clear to everyone? Are there any questions related to this that you have? Because the next that we are going to proceed to talk about is what is the cyber security architecture in India. So that is the next topic of discussion, which is the cyber security architecture in India. What are the various steps that have been taken by the government in India to deal with cyber security related issues? So we will now discuss the cyber security architecture in India. We are going to discuss this on two fronts. One, we are going to discuss the various institutional measures that have been taken, various institutions that have been created in India to deal with cyber security issues. And the second is we will be talking on the legal and policy front. What steps have been taken in order to deal with cyber security issues? Yes, any questions that you people have related to whatever we have discussed till here? See, very simple things, very simple concepts. There is nothing rocket science about them, but हमें बस basic चीजें पता होनी चाहिए. Yes. Any questions, Mansi? Okay, so let's do one thing. It's already 6:35, right? It's already past half the time of the class. Let's get into a break. Once we are back from the break, we will discuss the various institutional legal policy measures that have been taken by India in order to deal with cyber security threats. Then we will talk about what are the shortcomings or what are the challenges that India faces when it comes to our cyber security architecture. And then we will talk about the Budapest Convention, that is the only international convention that exists with respect to dealing with the threats in cyberspace. Once we are done with that, then we will talk about the role of social media and role of media in creating challenges to India's internal security. Okay, so let's go into a break. Once we are back from the break, we will discuss these remaining topics for today. I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so there's one question that has been asked, that does the Pegasus issue come within the definition of cybercrime? Of course, you know, I mean, when any particular software or any particular unauthorized access is being made into the system of someone else, when you're trying to hack into someone's personal data, that would of course fall into the definition of cybercrime. But of course, how the issue is going to be dealt with, what will be the verdict that will be provided, what laws would be applicable, etc., remains to be seen, because here in Pegasus the involvement of the state is there, right? The state is intruding into the privacy of its own citizens. So there are questions of constitutionality also that are also involved in this particular matter. So let's see what the panel of the Supreme Court has to say. There is already an expert panel of the Supreme Court that has been created on this particular matter related to Pegasus, and what this panel of Supreme Court has to say is something that would tell us a bit more about going ahead in the future. Now let's talk about what are the steps that have been taken in India with respect to cyber security. See, as far as institutional steps are concerned, what steps have been taken on the institutional front? First and foremost, you can talk about the setting up of Computer Emergency Response Team. So Computer Emergency Response Team, or CERT-IN, is a nodal agency that has been created for providing response in case of some cyber threats. So analyzing the information, dissemination of information, and taking measures or providing response with respect to cyber threats is the duty that is supposed to be performed by the CERT-IN. Okay, so it is called Computer Emergency Response Team. As the name suggests, it is supposed to provide response in case of the cyber threats that face India's cyberspace. Now there are various sectoral certs also that have been created. Now we have started to create various sectoral certs apart from one cert that was already existent in India. So sectoral certs are being created for various important sectors of the economy. For example, for the financial sector of the economy, there will be one financial sector cert that is being created to deal specifically with response to any cyber threats that the financial sector in India faces. Similarly, for the power sector, a cert has been created wherever any threats are faced by the power sector when it comes to the cyber threats, that will be dealt by the sectoral cert of the power sector, and so on and so forth. So that is one response that has been provided. That is one institution that has been created in India, creation of Computer Emergency Response Teams, and now we are looking at creation of various sectoral certs also in India. Apart from this, you can also mention about the creation of NCIIPC. Actually, this was done on the basis of the recommendation of the National Cyber Security Policy of 2013. So that is one another measure that we are going to discuss in brief, which was initiated in the year 2013. That is the National Cyber Security Policy of 2013. Okay, National Cyber Security Policy of 2013. Then NCIIPC is one organization that has been created. The responsibility and the duty of this organization or this institution is to provide response or to provide protection to critical information infrastructure of the country. Critical information infrastructure. So critical information infrastructure is supposed to be provided protection by NCIIPC. If there is any cyber threat which is faced by critical information infrastructure in India, that will be taken care of by NCIIPC. But what you need to keep in mind is what exactly is the meaning of the term critical information infrastructure. What do we understand by the term critical information infrastructure? So critical information infrastructure is that infrastructure, that information infrastructure on which the well-being of India's critical infrastructure is dependent upon. Critical information infrastructure refers to that information infrastructure on the basis of which well-being of India's critical infrastructure is dependent upon. What do I mean by that? Today, if you look at it, important critical infrastructure in India, all the critical infrastructure in India, whether it is the airports, whether it is the power distribution and power generation, whether it is transport, whether it is the water supply, whether it is the utility supply, whatever we talk about, all of this today is in some way or the other dependent upon certain information infrastructure or some information systems. So that information infrastructure which manages your critical infrastructure today is what is called as critical information infrastructure. Critical information infrastructure refers to the important information infrastructure that manages your critical infrastructure. और आज आप देखोगे right from power distribution to nuclear power generation to the airport traffic, everything is dependent upon information infrastructure, upon smart systems. So protection of these smart systems is the responsibility of NCIIPC that has been created in India. Then apart from that, you can also talk about National Cyber Crime Coordination Center, which is the apex authority that has been created under the leadership of the National Security Advisor. National Cyber Crime Coordination Center, or NC4, is an organization that has been created under the leadership of the National Security Advisor in India in order to provide response to the various cyber threats that India faces at the topmost level in the country. Okay, so that is also one institution that has been created in India in order to deal with cyber crimes. Then you can also talk about the special cyber crime cells set up by various state police departments. So various state police departments in India have also started to set up their cyber crime cell, right? Setting up a special cyber crime cell by the various state police department is also one institutional initiative that has been taken in order to deal with cyber crimes in India. इसके अलावा और क्या mention कर सकते हैं हम? We can talk about Cyber Swachhta Kendra, not the Chennai Super King, but Cyber Swachhta Kendra. Okay, this is a mechanism which is also called as a malware analysis and a botnet cleaning center, where individuals can analyze the various threats and various malwares that exist on their individual systems, and this botnet cleaning center would help them in cleaning the same. So Cyber Swachhta Kendra is another example that can be highlighted by you here. So special cyber crime cells set up by the various police departments, Cyber Swachhta Kendra, National Cyber Crime Coordination Center, National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center. Then you can also be talking about the various CERTs that have been created, sectoral CERTs that have been created. These are all the multiple institutions that have been created in India in order to deal with the cyber threats that face India. Okay. So on institutional front, these are some of the steps that have been taken in order to deal with cyber threats. ठीक है? अच्छा. अब लीगल और पॉलिसी फ्रंट के ऊपर क्या क्या स्टेप्स लिए गए? सी फर्स्ट एंड फॉरमोस्ट, नेशनल साइबर सिक्योरिटी पॉलिसी ऑफ 2013 was enacted in the year 2013. This policy lays down the priority areas. Policy lays down the priority areas for the various law and order agencies and the various enforcement agencies in India to pay attention to when it comes to dealing with cyber threats. For example, National Cyber Security Policy of 2013 said that we should create a nodal agency for providing response in case of cyber threats being faced by the critical information infrastructure of the country. So NCIIPC is a result of the creation of the National Cybersecurity Policy of 2013. Similarly, National Cybersecurity Policy of 2013 also talks about a greater role for the private sector, in providing response to the various cyber threats that India faces. How can we enhance the role of private sector in providing expertise in enhancing India's capability to deal with cyber threats? Then National Cybersecurity Policy of 2013 also said that within 5 years, India would be training a workforce of 3 lakh cyber security professionals. 3 lakh plus cyber security professionals would be trained within a period of 5 years of the release of the National Cybersecurity Policy of 2013. So that is also something that can be mentioned by you when we talk about steps that have been taken on the policy front. But let me tell you, National Cybersecurity Policy of 2013 needs a revision now. It has already been 9 years since this particular policy was revealed, and there are various chinks in the armor, or there are various lacunae in this particular policy. For example, the National Cybersecurity Policy of 2013 does not talk about the various threats that emanate from the social media, or it does not talk about the various threats that are emanating from the use of the cryptocurrencies. Or the National Cybersecurity Policy of 2013, even though it says that we should be creating a workforce of 3 lakh trained workforce professional or workforce in the area of cyber security, but how this 3 lakh people would be trained, what would be the places where these people would be trained, whose responsibility would it be to create this 3 lakh workforce professional, is something that we are still not aware of. The National Cybersecurity Policy of 2013 says that we should try to emphasize on improving the research and development in the area of cyber security. But how is that going to happen? Where are the funds going to come from? Which is the institution that is going to lead the research and development in the cybersecurity space is still something which is unclear to many of us. Okay, so that is another thing that can be mentioned by you, steps that have been taken on the legal and policy front. Then on the legal front, what you can also talk about is the IT Act of 2000 and the subsequent amendments that were made to the IT Act of 2000 in the year 2008. So amendments made to the IT Act, amendments introduced to the Information Technology Act 2000 in 2008. These are also some legal provisions that exist to deal with cyber crimes in India. Let me tell you something very interesting. The IT Act of 2000 was not enacted with the purpose of dealing with cyber security or to deal with cyber threats. Actually, it was enacted with the purpose of regulating the e-commerce in India, especially the B2B commerce, e-commerce that was taking place in India in the early 2000s, in order to regulate that and in order to provide some kind of a legal framework to the digital contracts that were being signed between the various firms and between the various commercial entities, was the reason with which the IT Act was enacted. It was only in the year 2008 that changes were introduced into the IT Act of 2000 to introduce several provisions related to cyber security. For example, section 66F of the IT Act that talks about cyber terrorism was included in the IT Act by the amendment in 2008. Similarly, the offense of identity theft that has been defined in section 66D of the IT Act has also been included by the virtue of the amendment made in the year 2008. But some people suggest that now the time has come for revamping this entire IT law in India and introducing a new law in India to deal with the cyber crimes and cyber threats. Another thing that you can also mention is that India has also put in proposal, or this draft is already being considered by the Parliament now, that the draft data protection bill, on the basis of the recommendations provided by draft data protection bill, on the basis of the recommendations provided by the Committee on Data Protection, that was BN Shri Krishna Committee, is also something which is almost at the verge of being considered by the Parliament, and it is very much possible that in the near future we would have a data protection law in India. So that is also another step that has been taken on the legal and the policy front in order to deal with cyber threats in India, right? So these are some of the things that can be mentioned by you, and plus if you read your value added material that has been shared with you by Vision IAS, there you will find a critique of the National Cyber Security Policy of 2013. Please be aware that this particular topic UPSC has already asked questions twice. So I do not expect that in the near future there will be any question that will be asked on National Cyber Security Policy of 2013. But on the safer side, I would request you that you please refer your value added material where content related to National Cyber Security Policy of 2013 and a critique of National Cyber Security Policy of 2013 has been provided, right? So that is also something that can be kept in mind by you when we talk about the National Cyber Security Architecture in India. Yes, any questions that you have related to this? What are the various steps that have been taken on the cyber security front by India? Yes. Any questions that you have? Now let's quickly talk about some of the limitations of the IT Act of 2000. Some of the limitations of IT Act of 2000 and what are the changes that are required in the IT Act of 2000. Now this is one topic which I am expecting a question on in the near future in the mains examination. So let's talk about what are the limitations of the IT Act of 2000. Okay. Now, see, first and foremost, when we talk about the limitations of the IT, oh my God, okay. Oops. Okay, so I almost ended up tripping over the wire here. Anyway, so what are the limitations of the IT Act of 2000? See, first and foremost, when we talk about the various limitations of the IT Act of 2000, you can mention about the vagueness of Section 69 of the Act relating to the liability of intermediaries. The liability of the intermediaries with respect to the data that has been posted on their platform, with respect to the information that has been posted on their platform, is something that we need to be aware of, which needs to be addressed in the IT Act. Presently in India, it is very difficult to hold the intermediaries or the various platforms on which the data is posted by the user. So how and in what manner would the accountability of the various intermediaries be ensured is something that is lacking in the IT Act of 2000. The other thing that you can also talk about with respect to the limitations of the IT Act is that there is a inadequate checks and balances. Inadequate checks and balances over the enforcement of various provisions under the Act. Okay. So inadequate checks and balances over the enforcement of various provisions of the act. You can specifically talk about section 66A of the IT Act. I hope all of you know about section 66A, must have been covered in polity classes with you, right? Section 66A that was held unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of India in the famous case of Shreya Singhal versus Union of India, right? On the account of violating the freedom of speech and expression and posing unreasonable restrictions on the freedom of speech and expression guaranteed under Article 19(1)(a). ये पॉलिटी क्लासेस में आपके साथ कवर किया होगा फैकल्टी ने, राइट? सो इनएडिक्वेट चेक्स एंड बैलेंसेस ओवर द एनफोर्समेंट ऑफ वेरियस प्रोविजंस. Section 66A, despite it being declared as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of India in Shreya Singhal case, many of the police agencies, many departments continue to enforce it, right? The reason for that remains to be lack of awareness and lack of understanding over the judgment of the Supreme Court, and as well as the fact that there are various checks and balances that are missing in the IT Act of 2000. So that is also something that you can talk about. Then you can also talk about that there are some provisions in the IT Act of 2000 that allow the state, some provisions allow the state to decrypt and monitor the information right. There are provisions under the IT Act of 2000 that allow the state to decrypt and monitor the information, monitor the various networks, monitor the various computing devices, etc. by the state, which can be considered as a violation of privacy of the citizens. So there are concerns over violation of privacy of the citizens also that are associated with the IT Act of 2000, which we need to keep in mind. Okay, so this is also another matter that can be highlighted by you when we talk about the shortcomings of the IT Act of 2000, right? Now, the next topic that we are going to discuss is what are the various challenges that exist in India in order to deal with the challenges in the cyber security, or what are the various threats that face the cyber security space in India. Okay, so what you can mention here is next heading, challenges pertaining to ensuring cyber security in India. What are the various challenges that the law and order agencies face in India with respect to cyber security? First and foremost, what you can mention here is lack of awareness among citizens, among various public officials with respect to cyber security. You can mention that the overall awareness among these general citizens about cyber security measures is very poor. There was a survey that highlighted that more than 80% of Indian CEOs do not consider cyber security as crucial to their company's growth. As a result, many of them fail to pay attention, time and resources to the issue of cyber security. Okay, lack of awareness related to cyber security. Then you can talk about shortage of trained workforce, shortage of trained workforce and trained professionals as far as cyber security is concerned. Okay, shortage of trained workforce and shortage of trained professionals with respect to IT security, with respect to cyber security in India. You can also talk about shortage of funds, or you can talk about lack of fund allocation by various government departments towards cyber security measures is also one of the challenges that we face when it comes to dealing with cyber security in India. Then you can talk about that we have created multiple agencies in India, but there is lack of coordination among all of these agencies that have been created for the purpose of cyber security. Lack of coordination between various agencies. Lack of coordination between various agencies is another aspect that can be highlighted by you. Okay, related to cyber security. What else? You can also talk about the over dependence on imported telecom equipment. You can give the statistic that more than 70% of the telecom equipment in India is imported from outside, and there is always a challenge, there is always a risk that is involved that there may be some kind of a virus, malware, some kind of a manufacturing defect induced in these devices that may cause threat to India's internal security. Okay, so over dependence on the imported telecom equipment is also something that can be highlighted by you, right? And then of course you should mention about that absence of a comprehensive data protection law also makes various instances of cyber security breach and data breaches easy, because there is no law that exists in India to deal with the various cyber security breaches that are taking place. Okay, so absence of a comprehensive data protection law is also something that can be mentioned by you as a problem associated with the cyber security in India. So what are the various challenges that we are facing when it comes to cyber security in India? These are some of the things that can be highlighted by you, and then way ahead के अंदर भी इन्हीं के रिस्पेक्ट में आप सजेशंस दे सकते हैं. Yes, any questions or any doubts related to whatever we have discussed till here? Challenges with respect to the cyber security. आप इसमें एक दो चीजें और मेंशन कर सकते हो. आप इसमें नॉन एनफोर्समेंट ऑफ डेटा लोकलाइजेशन नॉर्म्स की बात भी कर सकते हो, राइट? Because most of the companies that are operational in India, IT companies that are operational, big IT companies that are operational in India are not having their servers in India, and they have not locally stored their data here in India, even though the government has been pushing them to do so. As a result, in case any security breach takes place, these companies would not fall into the jurisdiction of the Indian law. It will be very difficult to hold them accountable. Okay, so that is also something that we need to highlight when we talk about challenges related to the cyber security in India. Yes, any questions that you people have related to whatever we have discussed till here related to cyber security? कोई सवाल है तो पूछिएगा. Any questions or any doubts still here? Now, what I wanted to show you was, see, we have already discussed the steps that have been taken by the Indian government on the legal front, on the institutional front. National Information Board also is one of the institutions that you can be talking about, right? Then the various important aspects of the national cyber security policy have been mentioned here. And as I told you, if you want to read a critical analysis of the national cyber security policy of 2013, it'll be good if you refer the value added material that has been shared with you. Then what are the limitations of the IT Act of 2000? These are some of the limitations apart from the limitations that we have already talked about. Some of the limitations of the national cyber security policy of 2013, you can note it down from here. What are the various challenges with respect to cyber security? We just discussed this, right? Then need for cyber security in India, we have already discussed. We have already discussed that why we need to pay emphasis on cyber security in a nation such as India. We have discussed this particular point as well. Now, the only international convention that has been enacted in order to promote cooperation between the nations when it comes to the cyber threats is what is called as Budapest Convention. Budapest Convention was enacted in the year 2005. It was proposed in 2001, by the Western countries, and now several other countries have joined as a part of Budapest Convention. India is still not a part of Budapest Convention. There are some concerns that have been raised by India, as a result of which India has not shown its keenness to sign the Budapest Convention. One of that has been that we were not involved in the initial stages of the framing of the Budapest Convention, so therefore as a nation we should not be involved in Budapest Convention now. Secondly, there have been reports that have been published and there have been inputs that have been given by the Intelligence Bureau to the Indian government that we should not sign the Budapest Convention because it would lead to compromising our sovereignty. How? Because if there is a crime that occurs in India and if the victim, let's say, is in United States of America, then Budapest Convention allows the security agencies of United States of America to investigate in India over a cyber crime that may have originated in India. Now, as per the intelligence agencies in India, this is going to lead to violation of India's sovereignty. How can some other countries' security agencies come and interfere and conduct their investigation in India? Would it not be compromising our own sovereignty? Would it not be compromising our own power over our own domestic affairs? So that is another issue that is associated with the Budapest Convention. Then on top of that, the Indian government also feels that Budapest Convention may act as an alibi or may act as some kind of a reason for the Western countries to be able to sell their expensive technology to developing countries of the world. Developing countries of the world fear that under Budapest Convention, countries will be asked to adopt certain standards of cyber security. And because developing countries would not have access to such information and technology in order to adopt these measures, ultimately they would have to buy this expensive technology from the developed countries. So Budapest Convention is essentially an alibi और एक तरीके का बहाना है ये Western countries ka to sell their expensive technology to the developing countries of the world. But see, you have to understand one thing. This is the only convention that exists that tries to promote inter-country cooperation, coordination, as well as trying to promote the capacity building of the various nations when it comes to dealing with cyber crimes and cyber threats. So perhaps Indian government needs to have a relook at its stance of not becoming a part of Budapest Convention. There are various advantages that would accrue to us as a part of becoming a part of this convention. First and foremost, we will get access to the information, we will get access to the best practices that are adopted by the various countries with respect to cyberspace. Secondly, if at least now we can become a part of this convention and we can shape the future of this convention. But India का concern ये है कि ये Budapest Convention जो है आप इसको UN level के ऊपर लेकर आइएगा. Because if you continue to implement this convention the way it is right now, whichever are the countries which will be signatory to this convention will be bound by this convention, not the other nations. So you should make it applicable to all the countries across the world. And for that, this convention should be introduced at the UN level is a suggestion that has been made by the Indian government. So those are some of the things that we need to keep in mind. So here are the arguments in favor and arguments in favor of joining the convention and arguments against joining the convention that I just discussed with you. You can note it down from here. These are some of the notes that you can use for the Budapest Convention topic. Now, there were two important committees that were made in order to provide recommendations to enhance the cyber security measures in India. First one was the Gulshan Rai committee and the second one was the Inderjeet Rao committee. So let's look at some of the recommendations that have been made by these particular committees as well. You can use these recommendations in your answers whenever you are supposed to provide recommendations on how to improve the cyber security or how to overcome the cyber threats that India faces as a nation. First and foremost, you can talk about creation of the cyber crime cells in each state and each district. Even today in India, many states have not created their dedicated cyber crime cells to deal with cyber crimes. Now, see, you cannot expect your regular police to be dealing with cyber crimes and cyber issues simply because of the reason because they do not have exposure to the law and they do not have training also. So you need to create specific cells within the state police department that would be given the responsibility of dealing with the cyber crimes. Secondly, appropriate certification should be given for the adoption of best practices by the various government departments. In fact, one thing that has been done is that now the Ministry of Information and Technology has released guidelines to the various departments in India that you should adhere to these standards and these protocol when it comes to cyber security measures. Okay, so that is also something that can be highlighted by you. Then more research and development is required on this particular front is also something that can be highlighted by you. You should talk about that how we need to collaborate, promote collaboration between the industry and the academia. We need to promote industry academia linkages in order to promote research and development that is oriented towards the industry. That is not just paperwork, but which is actually going to be useful for the industry as far as cyber security measures are concerned. Then we need to also train manpower to enhance the capacity. So perhaps we need to introduce more and more courses related to cyber security in the various universities, various colleges in India. You can also talk about internet servers should be hosted within the country. So we should introduce these data localization requirements with very strict directions provided to the various technology companies operating in India, that it is mandatory for you to have your local data servers located in India on which all the data pertaining to the Indians would be located, so that in case tomorrow there is a breach, then we can hold you accountable and it will be under our jurisdiction. Then regular and consistent changes should be brought in the IT Act and other legislations to tackle the cyber threats. See, the last amendment that was made in the IT Act was made 14 years back. The National Cyber Security Policy was enacted 9 years back. So perhaps it is a time that we become more proactive as far as our dealing with the cyber security issues is concerned. Then a separate agency should be created to deal with the data breaches. Okay, so जैसे डेटा प्रोटेक्शन अथॉरिटी का मेंशन किया है बीएन श्री कृष्णा कमेटी ने, या डेटा प्रोटेक्शन लॉ के अंदर भी उस डेटा प्रोटेक्शन अथॉरिटी की क्रिएशन की बात हुई है. You should have a separate agency that should be dealing with any of the cases of data breaches, and then stringent penalty provisions should be placed to deter individuals and agencies from misusing the private data. So that is also something that can be highlighted by you when you talk about the various challenges and what are the recommendations that have been provided by the various committees to deal with the cyber threats in India. Okay, so this is all about the topic of the basics of cyber security. But see, let me warn you that these topics are ever changing and these things keep changing very rapidly and very fast. So newer regulations are coming into place with respect to cryptocurrencies, with respect to social media, with respect to the Information Technology Act of 2000. So you need to be aware of these developments in current affairs, and you need to keep a very close eye on whatever is happening so that you can incorporate that into your notes and then you can use that in your answers in the mains examination. Okay. So this is all for the basics of cyber security topic. Any questions that you people may have pertaining to whatever we have discussed till here, please feel free to ask related to the topic of basics of cyber security. Yes, any questions that you have related to cyber security, basics of cyber security topic? Okay, now the next topic that I'm going to deal with is the role of social media in creating challenges to India's internal security. There is one handout that has been shared with you people, and I will be referring to that particular handout as a part of the discussion on that particular topic, because everything is already contained in that handout. We don't need to unnecessarily waste time on writing down things, right? There is another topic which has been covered as a part of this particular handout, which has been mentioned in this handout, which is related to the various security agencies and their mandate. My request to you will be that before you attend the next class, please read this particular handout so that we can have a much more fruitful discussion in the class. Now, so first and foremost, let us be aware of what exactly is social media. See, social media is, what is media in the first place? Media is a way to communicate, right? Now, when we talk about the conventional forms of media, such as radio media, such as the TV, such as television, etc., and such as the print media, but today we have newer forms of media that have originated. पहले जो फॉर्म ऑफ मीडिया थे उसमें एक सोर्स ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन होता था एंड द इंफॉर्मेशन वुड रीच आउट टू पीपल फ्रॉम वन पर्टिकुलर एंटिटी. जैसे कि आप अगर प्रिंट मीडिया में देखेंगे, द न्यूज़पेपर वुड प्रिंट द इंफॉर्मेशन एंड इट वुड बी available and accessible to the citizens. But social media is a completely different version of media, and it is a completely different way of sharing information and knowledge with each other. Social media is that new form or new age media which has emerged, where people can share information with each other by their own acts. That is, it is a platform, or it is that kind of a phenomenon where people are the generator of the information. People are the generator of the various facts on the media platform. So social media has become synonymous with social networking sites, etc. However, very broadly, social media can be defined as any web or mobile based platform that enables an individual or an agency to communicate interactively and enables exchange of user generated content. So instead of one particular entity or one particular organization generating content which is disseminated to the entire population, now people themselves are generating content and information over the social media. That is what is supposed to be understood by social media. Now, when you write any answer on the topic of social media in the mains examination, these are some of the key statistics that you could be using, that we are the largest market of social networking site, Facebook, after the United States of America. We have witnessed a growth in social media in last few years, starting from the Anna Hazare movement in 2011. It has played a very important role in influencing the public opinion. It has empowered the individuals in the society, because earlier the individuals did not possess the power to express their views in such a manner as it is there on social media today. So it has empowered the individuals also in many ways, right? So those are some of the things that we need to understand. Now, first let's try to understand that how the government and the various security agencies in India are using social media as a tool to enhance the internal security, and how they are adding to the various internal security measures with the help of social media. That is the first thing that we will be discussing. Then we will discuss about the various threats and challenges that are being created to India's internal security by the social media and the social networking websites. So first and foremost, when we talk from the perspective of the governments, the following represents some of the reasons for using social media. Okay, why and how the government is using social media in order to enhance the governance initiatives, in order to enhance the various internal security initiatives, is what we are going to study first. First and foremost, social media is being used by the government and these internal security agencies for enhancing their outreach to the citizens. Earlier, it was very difficult for the government agencies to reach out to the citizens except the TV advertisements or except the billboards, etc. But now today, with the help of social media, the government is able to effectively communicate about its programs, about the various laws, about various policies to the citizens of India with the help of the social media. Second is that it has also become a very crucial tool for seeking feedback and inputs from the citizens. See, governance is not a one-way process. Governance is not where the government only delivers services and goods to the citizens, but governance is also a process where you take the input and the feedback from the citizens on the improvement of the governance processes. So with respect to the implementation of various programs, with respect to the various schemes that are put on the anvil by the government or draft legislations, etc., social media has become a very powerful tool for the citizens to let their opinions known to the government agencies. Then on top of that, you can also talk about that social media is also helping the government in real-time engagement with the various citizens in the society. So what has been mentioned here is that social media releases the shackles of times and place for the engagement. It can connect policy makers to different stakeholders in recent times. In recent Libyan crisis, Ministry of External Affairs used the social media platforms such as Twitter to assist in locating and evacuating the Indian citizens from Libya, right? So that is also something that can be mentioned by you, that how the action that is being taken by the security agencies in India today is more proactive as well as in a time-bound manner as a result of the social media. Then you can talk about that social media is also helping the government in managing the perceptions. If you would have read today's newspaper, then on the first page, I think on the Indian Express or on Hindu, I'm not able to recollect which of the newspapers, there is a mention of the initiative that is being taken by the Maharashtra government in order to create awareness about the various initiatives that have been taken by the government in Gadchiroli district of Maharashtra, which is a Naxal affected district. To do away with the propaganda of the Naxalites, now government is also using social media extensively to spread information and to manage the perception of how government is perceived in the eyes of the common man. So that is also something that can be highlighted by you. Plus आप इसके अंदर ये भी बात कर सकते हो कि सोशल मीडिया के अंदर बहुत सारे इनिशिएटिव्स भी लिए हैं गवर्नमेंट और गवर्नमेंट एजेंसीज ने. आप एक एग्जांपल जो दे सकते हो, one specific example that can be given by you is the social media labs experiment of Maharashtra police. The social media labs experiment of Maharashtra police is aimed at analyzing the publicly available information on the social media websites and using that particular information and that particular details, जो सारी वो information और details हैं social media websites पे, to use that particular information on the social media websites for promoting the security measures. So वो क्या कर रहे हैं? They are analyzing the posts, they are analyzing the publicly information in data etc. on the websites, and now what they are doing is that with the help of that they are predicting that these are the individuals, those who are prone to radicalization, these are the individuals, those who seem to be inclined to certain terrorist organizations, so we need to keep a watch out on them. They are also trying to identify who are these individuals, those who are most prone to radicalization, so that we can wean them away from these radicalized elements even before they are radicalized, right? So that is something that can be mentioned by you. Social media labs experiment. Then you can also mention about how the various police organizations are now present on social media and they use social media as a tool to fake the rumor, to bust the rumors, to bust the fake news that is going around. आपको यूपी पुलिस का ट्विटर हैंडल दिखेगा, दिल्ली पुलिस का दिखेगा, महाराष्ट्र पुलिस का दिखेगा, आपको कर्नाटका पुलिस का दिखेगा, आंध्र प्रदेश पुलिस का दिखेगा. So every police department is now present on social media websites as well, where they are trying to effectively communicate with the citizens to reduce that trust deficit. See, the biggest problem that the internal security agencies in India face is that they have a trust deficit with the citizens. Now, social media is being used as a tool to bridge that trust deficit between the citizens and between the police agencies and the security agencies. More and more information is being provided regarding governance, regarding the various law and order measures that are taken by the security agencies on the social media websites by these various police agencies, handles, etc. So that is also something that can be highlighted by you when we talk about steps that have been taken in order to improve the governance and in order to enhance the internal security of the country with the help of social media. But see, having said all these great things about social media and how the security agencies are using them to their advantage, we also need to be aware of the fact that social media also creates certain challenges to India's internal security. Okay, so what are these challenges that social media is posing to India's internal security is also something that we need to be aware of. See, first and foremost, social media is being used extensively today in order to peddle hate and to spread fake news. We know of several instances where fake videos, where fake information has been circulated on the social media in order to create some kind of a tension in the society. We can refer to the Muzaffarnagar riots of 2013. We can talk about how the social media is misused by various mischievous elements to try to cause enmity between the various communities in India. So that is something that we can talk about. The northeastern mass exodus, Muzaffarnagar riots, etc. have revealed that hate contents circulated by social media sparked communal clashes. Behind nearly half a dozen communal clashes in the country, reason was the content on social media that insulted or humiliated the various religious figures of different communities. In an uglier turn of events, mobile and social network interface has been used to send offensive clips and hate messages that triggered panic and mass exodus of Northeast Indians from large parts of India in aftermath of the ethnic clashes in Assam in 2012. I already mentioned to you about this. One person was arrested in Bangalore for sending out 20,000 messages, imagine. And similarly in 2013, social media was used to spread hatred and inflame the riots in Muzaffarnagar. So social media today is also becoming a bane to the society and it is causing concerns to the national security agencies in India. Secondly, you can also talk about that how the social media is being used to cause the national security concerns as well. London riots that happened in 2012 were mobilized with the help of social media. Today, a large number of stone pelting incidents that happen in Kashmir are also mobilized with the help of social media. So you can mention rioters in London used location-specific media technologies to communicate, posted pictures of themselves next to stolen goods, used a smartphone app called Suki to identify physical location of police forces in real time and used BlackBerry Messenger to coordinate attacks. Other national security challenges are also our spread of terrorism, hawala money in form of cryptocurrency, etc. is also something which is very closely related to social media. A number of financial frauds are now occurring on social media, right? So that is also something that can be mentioned by you. Dating apps are being used in order to solicit the personal and private information of the individuals, and then that information is being misused to cause financial frauds against the individual. So that is also something that can be highlighted by you. Various social media websites also, fake accounts are created. Fake accounts are created where, let's say tomorrow you may have a fake account in my name where someone may be asking money from you. Now you may think, "Yare, teacher is asking us for money in this situation of need, let us send some money to him." But in reality, that social media account would be belonging to someone else, and that someone else would be trying to fool you in my name and in the the details that would be put, it would seem that the account belongs to me, but the idea would be to solicit money out of you to commit some kind of a fraud against you, right? Then on top of that, social media is also being used to disseminate pornographic and obscene content and material over the internet. A large number of morphed images, a large number of obscene content related to the children, related to the women is being circulated with the help of social media today, which is also a major national security concern in many ways. Then on top of that, identity theft is another problem that we see on the social media, which we need to be aware of, which says that the identity theft is another problem generated by social media, since social media websites generate revenue with targeted advertising based on personal information. They encourage their users to provide maximum personal information. With limited regulatory oversight by the government, industry standards, or incentives to educate users on security, privacy, and identity protection, they are exposed to identity theft. Your identity may be stolen by someone, and someone else may masquerade as you on social media websites. So that is also something. Cyberbullying and harassment, of course, is something that we need to be aware of. Bully incident in the recent times. Then there was another report that was released by Wire just a couple of days back, where they talked about how the various political parties are now using social media in order to send hate messages to various journalists, those who are writing against these political parties. So that is also something that can be highlighted. Then the snooping and the misuse of the online data. You can talk about the Cambridge Analytica issue. You know how the data of the Facebook was misused in order to manipulate the voting patterns and the voting behavior of the individuals in the general elections in India. So that is also something that can be mentioned by you when we talk about the challenges that are posed by social media to India's internal security. Now, the question that arises is that when it is posing such great challenges, why are we not able to overcome these challenges which social media is posing to our India's internal security? The reasons for this have been mentioned here. So why is it so challenging to overcome the various threats that social media poses to India's internal security? First and foremost, you need to keep in mind the ever expanding base of social media. Every moment there is terabytes of data that is being uploaded on websites such as YouTube, Facebook, etc. It is practically impossible to keep a track of all of this information without the use of technology. And therefore now social media websites are developing their own AI tools, big data tools, etc. in order to analyze that what information may be inflammatory in nature, what information may be trying to incite violence in the society, what information may be threatful to the internal security, and how do we overcome that. You can also talk about the ineffectiveness of the censorship on the content and its impact on the citizens' freedom as well. See, the problem is that social media should be regulated only to a certain extent. Because if you start over-regulating social media, then it would lead to curbing of the freedom of speech and expression of the citizens, the way it happened in the Shreya Singhal case or by the misuse of Section 66A. So the problem with respect to regulating social media is that where do you draw the line? That too much interference can lead to intrusion into privacy, and not having a very proactive approach can lead to misuse of the social media. Therefore, now Government of India has released guidelines at the beginning of this year to be followed by the social media intermediaries as well as by the OTT platform. Separate set of guidelines, 3-tier mechanism guidelines have been released by the Government of India with respect to the social media platforms and the various OTT platforms in India. What I would recommend to you is that either you refer the mains 365 material, उसमें आपको ये सारी गाइडलाइंस नक्शल में मिल जाएंगी, आप वहां से पढ़ लीजिएगा, या फिर आप जो फरवरी और मार्च का 2021 का करंट अफेयर्स मटेरियल था विजन आईएएस का, उसमें आपको ये गाइडलाइंस मिल जाएंगी जो कि गवर्नमेंट ने रिलीज करी थी विद रिस्पेक्ट टू दी सोशल मीडिया इंटरमीडियरीज एंड फॉर रेगुलेटिंग दी ओटीटी प्लेटफॉर्म्स इन इंडिया. so that their misuse can be prevented, but at the same time we do not end up over regulating these platforms. Then there is difficulty in prosecution and tracking of the crime also because of jurisdiction problems. See, there is a possibility that someone who may be posting offensive, hateful messages on social media may be located somewhere in Netherlands, Germany, Australia, etc. How are you going to catch hold of that individual, because you do not have jurisdiction over that area to conduct investigation in that area and so on and so forth. So that is also another challenge that is associated with regulating of the social media. Then on top of that, lack of geographical boundaries makes social media regulation an arduous task. Lack of digital literacy amongst people, as see, people are very innocent and people are very naive when it comes to use of social media. Just a few days back my mother told me that, hey, I have got this particular message from the bank that they will be giving us a bonus of some 10,000 rupees. We just need to share our details with this particular person who has asked me on the message. And I was like, this is definitely a fraud or a scam that you are being lured into. Please don't get into this. Now imagine educated people, middle class people in the urban areas are falling into the trap of these various scams that are being released on social media. And you can very well imagine what is happening in the rural areas of the country. So that is another concern that can be highlighted. And then of course, when we talk about use of artificial intelligence to detect the various malicious information, fake news, and various hate speech messages being posted on social media, it is still very difficult to do so because the AI technology is still at a very nascent stage, and it may not be very effective in detecting all the kind of wrong information, fake news, fake messages that may be posted on the social media. So that is also something that can be highlighted by you. Now, what is the way forward? We need to ensure responsible use of social media by increasing the digital literacy. Joint steps should be taken by government and social media platforms. You can talk about the Christchurch call to action. You can talk about the social media guidelines that have been released by the government of India, right? Strengthening of the cyber security organizations and IT cell of law enforcement agencies. International consensus should also be evolved over extradition of the criminals involved in cyber crimes, so that their extradition from one country to another can take place easily, and data protection and privacy must be enhanced. So we need to enact a strong data protection law as well in India is something that we need to keep in mind. So what are the challenges that exist in regulation of the social media have been mentioned here. और फिर मैंने यहाँ पे ना एक फाइनल वर्ड ऑन रेगुलेशन मेंशन किया है कि भाई रेगुलेशन उतना ही होना चाहिए जहां तक आप उसके फ्रीडम ऑफ स्पीच एंड एक्सप्रेशन को कर्ब ना करें. सो आप एक बार इनको पढ़ लीजिएगा दैट रेगुलेशन ऑफ सोशल मीडिया should be best left to the tech companies themselves, and there are several reasons for that which I have mentioned here in this particular document. You please read this on your own. This is something which is very crucial. और फिर गवर्नमेंट किस तरीके का रोल प्ले कर सकती है रेगुलेशन के अंदर सोशल मीडिया की, वो भी मैंने यहाँ पे इस डॉक्यूमेंट में मेंशन किया. वेरी सेल्फ एक्सप्लेनेटरी काइंड ऑफ थिंग्स. ओके, सो प्लीज रीड इट ऑन योर ओन. नाउ what are the various police initiatives that have been taken on enhancing the security with respect to the social media? So you can talk about the Delhi Traffic Police having its own Twitter handle, Maharashtra Police having its complaint tracking system which is called as the Turant 24, which they are launched for tracking of the various complaints and grievances. Then you can talk about the social media platform which I had just mentioned to you with respect to Mumbai Police or with respect to Maharashtra Police, right? So that is also something that you can mention here, right? Police initiatives के अंदर. और फिर उसके अलावा क्या recommendations हैं? What are the recommendations? First and foremost, there is a requirement to institutionalize a social media policy in India. We still do not have a national social media policy, and National Cyber Security Policy of 2013 does not talk about what will be our approach to dealing with internal security threats that emanate from the social media. Second, you can talk about implementing and institutionalizing the framework of guidelines for social media engagement. So that has already been released by the government at the start of this year. Creating awareness and challenges that are posed by social media to the citizens, to the various officials, government departments, etc. Creating organization ecosystem, circumventing the hierarchy, and encouraging the outreach of the various government departments to the citizens directly with the help of social media, right? Replicate social media labs kind of experiment across the country by various police departments is also something that can be mentioned by you. तो ये कुछ चीजें हैं जो आप इस डॉक्यूमेंट से एक बार पढ़ लीजिएगा These are very comprehensively provided here and should help you in understanding this entire topic properly. Okay, so role of social media in creating challenges to India's internal security. Right now, I think it is already 8 o'clock, so I'll call up the class here. In the next class when we will meet, first we will talk about a very interesting topic. That is the role of media in creating challenges to India's internal security. वो बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग टॉपिक है, पहले उसको कवर करेंगे, फिर हम डील करेंगे विद द टॉपिक ऑफ वेरियस सिक्योरिटी एजेंसीज एंड देयर मैंडेट, एंड देन आई विल मूव ऑन टू द टॉपिक ऑफ द role of border management and the role of external state actors in causing threats to India's internal security. और उसके अलावा जो एक और टॉपिक बचेगा वो हमारा ग्लोबल टेररिज्म का टॉपिक बचेगा. राइट, सो दीज आर द टॉपिक्स दैट वी विल बी कवरिंग इन द नेक्स्ट 2 classes. But before I call up the class here, if you people have any doubts or any questions, please feel free to ask and we can deal with those doubts right now. कोई भी doubts हैं, कोई questions हैं आपके दिमाग में तो प्लीज पूछिएगा. Yes, any questions related to whatever we have discussed till here, please. इस टॉपिक पे आप क्वेश्चंस हर साल एक्सपेक्ट कर सकते हो, है ना, बिकॉज ये इतना इंपॉर्टेंट और लाइवली टॉपिक है. मैं इनफैक्ट इस बार एक्सपेक्ट कर रहा था क्वेश्चन सोशल मीडिया गाइडलाइंस जो रिलीज की गई गवर्नमेंट के द्वारा, उसके बेसिस उसके ऊपर क्वेश्चन यूपीएससी ने नहीं पूछा है. तो इट मीन्स दैट फॉर यू पीपल नाउ, दोज हु आर गोइंग टू अपीयर इन द एग्जामिनेशन दिस ईयर, दैट इज 2022, you people can expect a question on social media and the role of social media in creating challenges to India's internal security. You can expect a question on that particular topic. Yes, yes, please, any questions that you have. Any questions, Mansi? Okay, fine. Thank you so much and wishing all of you a very happy weekend. Please stay safe and please take care of yourself and your loved ones, and ensure that you do not venture out much. You know, the situation is not really great right now, and just try to take a healthy diet, take good rest, and of course, most importantly, study hard and rest well, right? I'll see you next week and we will continue with the rest of the topics in our next 2 classes for internal security. Bye bye, take care and have a good weekend.